the bombshell start. Every single year in almost every country on Earth, a silent betrayal happens. It doesn't make the news. It rarely makes court. But it shatters families, wrecks men's lives, and scars children for years. I'm talking about paternity fraud. The hidden epidemic no one really wants to confront. Men across the globe raising children they believe are theirs, until one day something doesn't add up. A slip of the tongue. A medical condition. A blood type that shouldn't be possible. One test later, and everything unravels. They're not the father. And you want to know the scariest part? 1 in 3 men who take a paternity test find out they've been lied to. 1 in 3. Now imagine that number across your city, your workplace, your neighborhood. That's not just betrayal. That's a crisis. So today we're tackling the question most people avoid, because it's messy, emotional, and it hits way too close to home. Should DNA tests be mandatory after every childbirth? No exceptions? Or is that just a way of destroying trust, insulting women, and turning hospitals into crime scenes of suspicion? I'll let you decide. But by the end of this episode, you may never look at fatherhood the same way again. The hidden epidemic, paternity fraud in the shadows. Let's stop pretending like this is rare. You won't see it trending on Twitter. No politician wants to touch it. Most people would rather sweep it under the rug. But the data is out there. When men do take paternity tests, between 20% to 30% of the time, the child turns out to be someone else's. Now, let's be clear. That statistic only applies to men who are already suspicious enough to get tested. But even if that number is skewed high, imagine what the real number might be if every man got tested at birth. How many lives would be exposed as lies? This isn't just about cheating. This is about decades of deception. You have men out there raising children from birth to adulthood, paying child support, sacrificing dreams, working overtime, building a future for a child who shares none of their DNA. And some of them don't find out until years later. There are cases, documented, of men who raised a child for 18 years, only to find out when they needed a kidney match or a rare blood transfusion, or during a legal battle, that the child was never biologically theirs. And here's the part that makes your stomach turn. In many jurisdictions, once a man signs the birth certificate, he's legally stuck. That's right. Even if a DNA test proves he's not the father, courts can still force him to continue paying child support. What? Because of one phrase, in the best interest of the child. But what about the best interest of the man? The man who's had his reality twisted? Who's been defrauded of time, money, and emotional investment? That's the epidemic no one's talking about. Paternity fraud doesn't just affect men. It affects kids raised under lies. It affects families, built on deception. And it affects society, when accountability dies and trust gets weaponized. If truth is optional, what kind of relationships are we building? The male perspective, when trust becomes a life sentence. Let's talk about what it really means to be a father. It's more than DNA. Yes. But let's not pretend like DNA doesn't matter. When a man is told he's a father, that's not a casual title. That's a life-altering, soul-defining, financial contract-level commitment. He's expected to protect, provide, guide, sacrifice. He's judged, as a man, based on his ability to take care of that child. So imagine being told you have a child and you step up. You grind. You raise them. You give them your last name. You give them your time, your money, your legacy. Then years later, a DNA test tells you that child isn't yours. Think about the psychological trauma, the feeling of betrayal. You're not just grieving a child. You're grieving your identity. You weren't just lied to. You were used. And here's where it gets worse. In many states, countries, and courts, the truth doesn't matter. If you signed that birth certificate, even if you were misled, misinformed, or manipulated, the court might say, too late. You're still the legal father. You have to keep paying. And if you don't, jail. That's not justice. That's extortion. Men aren't asking to abandon their responsibilities. They're asking for the right to know if those responsibilities were ever truly theirs in the first place. Is that really too much to ask? Or have we gotten so used to protecting lies that we've made truth the villain? The woman's argument, trust, trauma, and accusation. Let's pause. Because not everyone agrees. The moment someone says mandatory DNA tests, many women, and rightfully so, feel insulted. They feel like it's an attack on their integrity. Like the very idea of testing assumes they're liars, cheaters, or untrustworthy. And to be fair, for women who have been loyal, faithful, and honest, it does feel like a slap in the face. Imagine giving birth, going through 9 months of emotional turmoil, physical pain, hormonal changes, and the trauma of labor. And the first thing the system says is, we need to make sure this baby is actually his. That doesn't feel like safety. That feels like suspicion. It doesn't feel like protection. It feels like being criminalized for someone else's mistakes. And here's the emotional side many men don't understand. For women, pregnancy is intimate, vulnerable, spiritual. It's a moment when she wants to feel safe, seen, and supported, not second-guessed by hospitals and legal paperwork. For some women, mandatory testing sends a louder message. You're not trusted. And that creates a wall between the couple right from the start. Women fear that if DNA testing becomes automatic, men will feel entitled to distrust, even when there's no reason. That families will be built not on love, but on paranoia. They argue that if a man wants a test, he should just ask for one. If he can't trust the woman he's having a child with, why is he with her? It's a fair point. And for many women, the idea that every mother must prove her child's paternity feels deeply degrading, like being accused without a trial. So we're at a crossroads. On one hand, protect men from false paternity. On the other, protect women from being automatically treated like suspects. It's emotional. It's complex. But here's the truth. This debate isn't about calling women liars. It's about protecting people from life-altering lies. And if the roles were reversed, if women could be legally trapped into raising someone else's child unknowingly, would they want protection too? Trust isn't a substitute for truth. Let's cut to the core. This is bigger than gender. This is about truth. Because without truth, trust is a gamble. It's like driving blind and hoping you don't crash. Now here's what's wild. In nearly every area of life, we demand proof before responsibility. You want a job? You show your qualifications. You buy a house. You check the title deed. You get married? You sign a contract. But when it comes to one of the biggest commitments a human being can make, fatherhood, we say, nah, just trust her. Why is this the one area where asking for truth is considered offensive? It's not about mistrusting her. It's about protecting everyone. Because here's what no one talks about. Even the child suffers when the truth is hidden. Imagine growing up thinking one man is your biological father, only to find out years later that it was all a lie. That affects identity. That affects self-worth. That affects how that child views their entire family. And worse, what happens when they need a blood match or an organ donor and can't find one because their father isn't biologically related at all? This isn't just emotional. It's medical. It's safety. And yet society says, don't ask. Don't test. Just believe. But when truth becomes optional, deception becomes acceptable. So let's be real. Trust is important. But trust without truth is fragile. It only works until it doesn't. And when it fails, the consequences are nuclear. Mandatory DNA testing isn't about shaming women. It's about creating a system where the truth comes first, not after the damage is already done. Because if your relationship can't survive a test rooted in truth, what was it really built on in the first place? Let's talk solutions. A DNA test can save lives. So what do we do about it? How do we protect men from deception, without disrespecting women in the process? How do we make sure children grow up with truth, not trauma? It starts with a simple solution. Make DNA testing standard protocol at birth. No drama. No accusation. Just like blood typing. Just like eye exams. A DNA test should be a routine part of birth registration. Not because we assume someone cheated, but because truth should be a baseline, not an afterthought. It's not about saying, we don't trust you. It's about saying, let's build our family on solid ground. Because one lie hidden at birth can destroy 5 lives by adulthood. And the worst part? The damage doesn't stop at the couple. The child grows up caught between a lie and the fallout. A DNA test is not an insult. It's insurance. It ensures a man isn't being tricked. It ensures a woman doesn't face accusations years down the road. It ensures a child grows up with clarity and biological truth. And in a world full of confusion, lies, and half-truths, isn't that the least we can do? If we can agree that paternity fraud is real, then we can't keep treating this conversation like it's taboo. If a simple swab can save a life, a relationship, a future, why wouldn't we use it? The uncomfortable truth we can't ignore. So here we are, back where we started. One question, one truth, one uncomfortable reality. Should DNA tests be mandatory after every birth? Not as an attack, not as an accusation, but as a standard like every other medical check we perform when a new life enters the world. Because what's more dangerous, a test that offends someone, Or a lie that lasts 20 years? We talk a lot about rights in today's world. A woman has the right to choose. A child has the right to be loved. But what about the father's right to truth? What about the man who shows up, who sacrifices, who gives his soul to a child, thinking they share the same blood? And what about that child, who one day looks in the mirror and wonders why their reflection doesn't match their story? This isn't about distrust. It's about honesty. This isn't about male versus female. It's about building families on something stronger than hope. Truth. Now listen. Maybe some people will never agree with mandatory testing. Maybe they'll always see it as an attack, not protection. Maybe emotions will always cloud what logic makes obvious. But if we can get past pride, if we can get past ego, maybe we'll finally see the real picture. One swab could prevent 18 years of betrayal. One test could save a man from becoming a wallet instead of a father. One piece of truth could protect an entire generation from growing up in a house built on sand. The question is, do we value truth enough to demand it? Or are we too comfortable living in a world where lies wear smiles, and deception gets rewarded with silence? You decide. Should every child be DNA tested at birth, or should we keep playing this dangerous guessing game? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is Crazy Discuss, where the lines between logic and emotion collide. And remember, the truth will always cost less than a lie. Until next time.